our live stream. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, around 10:05. But until then, feel free to drop in the chat any questions or how you're feeling this morning, and we'll get started shortly.
How are you feeling this morning, Frankie?
Exhausted. I feel like this week has been like 30 days long. I don't know why. I thought yesterday was Friday. I thought Tuesday was Monday.
Yeah, I'm in that weird place of tired but energized.
Tired but energized. I feel like that's been a common theme over the past couple of weeks, where we are tired. We know what we're here to talk about this morning, and we are working hard, and we are energized for what's ahead. We are moving forward. We're moving forward, but it feels like Friday.
Yeah, it feels like an actual Friday, yeah.
Sincerely, Gabby says, "Hey, Helena."
Hey, Gabby. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
We're just going to get started in a couple more minutes. We'll let people trickle in. Anyone have any cool weekend plans?
I mean, I'm going to find it cool.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. It's summertime. I saw a movie outside last night. That's always
It's fun. I haven't done that yet.
Things up. Yep, down at the Wharf. Highly recommend it. There's a series at the Wharf. For those who are in DC proper, there's a series at the Wharf on Thursday evenings. 3 movies outside.
What did you watch?
Last night was A League of Their Own, which it's a good break. Given everything that's going on, it was a good break to sit outside. A few raindrops on us, but mostly some clear summer skies.
Oh, Caroline just said hi.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi. We miss you.
We really do.
Miss you instantly.
Are they coming out with a show earlier?
Yeah, or a new movie. Is it a new movie or a new show? One of them. But I've seen stuff on that. I feel like the first one was classic, so hard to
We're good to start.
Cool. Thank you all for joining us this Friday morning. We're going to get started here. My name is Frankie McDaniel. I'm the Director of Organizing and Volunteer Programming here at Planned Parenthood of Metropolitan, Washington, D.C. I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves in just a moment. But this morning we're here to talk about what's been happening over the last 3 weeks. It has been exactly 3 weeks since SCOTUS overturned Roe v. Wade. And a lot has happened across the country and here in the DC metro area. So we're here to update you on what has been going on over the last 3 weeks, what you guys can do to get involved and help, and how to stay informed. You guys want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Helena Hernandez. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Public Affairs Manager over here at PPMW.
And I'm Betsy Harned. Hi, everybody. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am the Vice President of Public Affairs for PPMW.
Helena and Betsy will share some policy updates on what's been going on in the DC metro area, but please feel free to drop in the chat your questions, concerns, comments, but we also want to do a temperature check, like how is everyone feeling over the last 3 weeks? We were talking about it earlier. Personally, I'm exhausted and feel like I grow angrier every day with just like the stat of how things are going and what I'm watching on the news. And so we were saying earlier, like trying to remain hopeful, but also like still in it for the fight. It's a long road ahead, so happy to be part of this community. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, so as Frankie mentioned, the Supreme Court last month overturned Roe v. Wade, dismantling our constitutional rights to abortion, and it's been really hard. I know a lot of people are frustrated, angry, mad, kind of lost in not knowing what to do, but also just knowing that we're going to keep fighting no matter what. And people want to know how to fight, what's happening in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and what all this means for us and our access to this fundamental care that's our rights. So know that PPMW, our doors will stay open no matter what. We are here to provide care. And know that abortion is still legal in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And Betsy will go into more detail about what that looks like in all those regions, and also know that there is stuff happening also at the federal level, at local level, to try to ensure our rights to abortion are being met. As we all know, last week, President Biden signed an executive abortion access. Although it's not everything we want or everything we need, there's more we can do, and there's more we're doing at the local level. So I'll turn it over to Betsy.
Great. Thanks, Helena. Thanks, Frankie. And hi, everybody. And yeah, I just want to echo, there we know has been a range of emotions, and there continues to be a roller coaster of emotions. And we are here for you at PPMW in any way that we can be. And we hope that you are going to be able to join us in the fight, because as was mentioned, there is a long fight ahead. So what's happening here? There's a lot that's happening here. So why don't we start with DC? For those who are in DC, interested in DC local politics, not necessarily what's happening on Capitol Hill, but what's happening with DC Council, what's happening with the mayor, what's happening right here for those of us who live in the district. So we are fortunate in DC that our elected officials locally are supportive of reproductive health care and contain true reproductive health care champions. And so a couple of years ago, we were really proud as PPMW to work together with local DC council members to help pass a law. It was called the Strengthening Reproductive Health Protections Amendment Act. But that law basically put on the books that in DC, there can't be any governmental interference with your right for reproductive health care, including but not limited to accessing abortion. So DC, on the books, signed by the mayor, we have a law that protects abortion. So Roe has been overturned. That is an absolutely unconscionable decision. It is unconscionable that right now abortion access is not protected across the country. Right here in DC, we do have that protection. But there is a huge vulnerability for us because DC is not a state. So one of the things that PPMW is proud to work on is we're proud to work on statehood and the fight for statehood to make DC a state. Because we're not a state, we're not like some other states like Maryland, where in Maryland we have a law in the books that says that access to abortion is legal, and that's the law in Maryland. That is something that Maryland can continue to pass laws and has, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, to increase access. In DC though, we are not a state, and so Congress actually has authority over us, and we are vulnerable to anything that Congress wants to do if they have the votes to, for example, they could, in the future, if they have the votes, put an abortion ban in on DC. We know that there's that vulnerability. So right now we are protected. Right now we are protected because we have this law that we've fought hard for that is on the books, and then we also have a Congress right now and a president where we are not going to see that, but it's vulnerable because we know that the makeup of Congress and the makeup of the presidency changes, and so that could be a change over time. So I will stop there and then see if there's anything that you all want to add about that in particular, and then keep going and talk a little bit more about DC and what's happening now.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability to congressional interference is super important to emphasize, and we will talk a little bit later of what you all can do to support specifically DC statehood. But I just want to make sure for folks following us on Instagram, links to things to get involved that we mentioned will be dropped, will be in our link tree. For those on Facebook, we'll drop in the chat. But yeah, it's super important. I think that, like, for me as like a newer resident to DC too, it's also just like you sort of forget some of the things that are beneficial about being a state, and I think one of these, and it's easy to just like forget about it. And I know personally I'm exhausted being told to vote every like 2 to 4 years, but it's so important that we're voting for candidates that support DC statehood and will fight for DC statehood. Again, we'll talk about that a little later, but please drop in any comments or questions in the chat.
So there's one very specific example about how DC statehood impacts reproductive health care in particular. Because some folks, it seems like, of course, it is wrong. It is absolutely wrong that we have an area right now of almost 1 million people who don't have a vote in Congress. That is unconscionable. But how does that impact reproductive health care? And every single day there's an impact here because Congress controls DC's budget. So even though we all pay taxes, those of us who are DC residents all pay taxes, and we have local elected officials, and our local elected officials who we elected represent our values, have said that we want to provide abortion coverage in Medicaid like other states do. Congress every year prevents us from doing that in the appropriations process. That is a real impact. That means that patients who come to us at PPMW, they come to us, if they have Medicaid in DC, they're not able to use that for abortion coverage services, even though our local officials, and it's our values that they be able to do so when they can in other states. That is a direct impact of reproductive health care that impacts folks right here at PPMW every day. And so we definitely need to keep up the fight for DC statehood. Shall I talk a little bit about what's going on in DC Council now?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Go.
Okay.
There's lots going on.
There's lots going on. So, thank you again, everybody who's joining us, and for anybody who just joined us in the last couple of minutes. We're here today to talk about, we know that Roe has been overturned. We see what's happening across the country. But we have right here in DC, Maryland, and Nova, abortion remains legal. And what does that mean, and how can you help? So one of the things that's happening right now is that DC right now actually has 5 new bills pending. There was a hearing on 2 of them yesterday, and we were proud to provide testimony. And when the hearing comes up on the other 3, likely in the fall, we'll be proud to provide testimony then as well and continue the fight. And these bills are all proactive measures from your council members. Shout out to Councilmember Nadeau, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Robert White, who also chaired the hearing yesterday. Shout out to them for their leadership, and for Charles Allen, who also is a tremendous leader and represents Ward 6, where PPMW is located in DC. These bills do a variety of things, all focused on increasing access to healthcare by helping to make sure that there are protections for folks who self-manage abortions and those who help them, those who assist. We see that what's going on across the country is that in some of these anti-states, there are direct targets of those who assist people in getting care. There is a bill right now that Councilmember Henderson has taken leadership on that will ensure that anybody who assists folks who are self-managing abortions, which we know is safe, that they never face any kind of penalty. And then there are also a myriad of bills pending right now from Councilmember Nadeau and Councilmember White that will help protect providers who are also providing for folks who are coming in from out of state. Or perhaps there are providers who are licensed in multiple states, and one of those states is one of those anti-states that's going to be doing and will continue doing horrible things against providers. For those in DC, these bills will protect to make sure that any abortion provider in DC, their licenses are protected, their medical malpractice insurance, like real practical stuff is protected, and that we remove any barriers that might still exist. There's a pending bill right now for insurance coverage without cost sharing for abortion coverage and private insurance in DC. That is something that absolutely can help move the needle towards equity. It's something that we just absolutely need to do. You can get involved we can provide you more information about those bills. You can submit written testimony still for the hearing yesterday. You can submit testimony when the hearing comes up down the road, and there'll be other advocacy opportunities we'd welcome you to join us on as well.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that was a lot we just threw at you for DC, but Betsy made so many good points there on what's happening in DC, what we're working on to protect access, and also for people coming out of state, because DC is a hub that offers a place for people to come for abortion care.
And there's really so many accessible ways to get involved, right? So submitting testimony, that's your bag, that's great. But then social media advocacy is huge in this area. So if you follow us and then continue to help spread the word, show other people that you are behind these bills, find out if you're a DC resident, what ward are you in? Figure out who's your council member, call them and thank them, or call them and encourage them. If you see that they're on the bill, they're one of the leaders that we mentioned, call them and thank them. They need to hear from us. They hear from our opposition. They need to hear from us. If they're not on the bill, call them and ask them, hey, why not? You need to really step up and help protect reproductive health care. These are really simple ways, and then encourage your friends to do so. You find that number, put that on social media too. Encourage your friends to do so. That's how we can get these bills to come to fruition, and get them to come to fruition fast, because we need to move fast on all of this.
Yes.
The time is now.
And I think it's important to remember we don't want to get comfortable. Because we have access now does not mean we will always had that. As Betsy says, Congress controls the budget of DC and controls what happens here to some extent. So call your council members, call your rep, call everyone you can, do the advocacy work because it's especially important during this time.
So Karen, 29, wants to know, how safe are folks coming out of state seeking abortion from their conservative state?
Great question. So much confusion out there. I am so glad that you asked this question. Our doors are open for everybody. Please, anybody who needs care, they're coming from a state where care is now illegal, or and that's gonna grow. We're in about a dozen states right now where there are bans at certain points, and we are anticipating that will grow to 26 states where there are bans present, and it will grow quickly. So this is going to impact a lot of folks. Come to us. We want to make sure that you have care. Our doors are open to everybody. It does not matter where you live. If anybody needs assistance, one of the biggest action items we have right now is to make sure that folks are donating to abortion funds. There are so many ways to do this, and this is the #1 priority right now, because real people coming from a state where abortion has been banned, they need assistance in so many ways. Some folks need assistance with travel, need assistance with childcare, and abortion funds, donating to abortion funds means that you are helping actual people get access to care. Our doors are open, and if you have any specific questions, please never hesitate to contact our call center. They are there for you for specific questions, and our doors are always open.
And I think it's like super important to highlight like the importance of connecting with local abortion funds, supporting them, and donating to them. They are getting, as we were seeing, also an influx of volunteer inquiries, and that's great. But what they do need is funds to continue to cover those services for people. But I also really want to encourage people to stay connected to local abortion funds, because we are also seeing an influx of people volunteering to help transport people, and we can't ensure that people that are doing this by themselves on their own are being vetted for those safety reasons. So it's equally important to make sure that we're supporting our local abortion funds, who are also doing that filtering and vetting to make sure that people who are being supported are doing so safely and confidentially. Betsy sort of talked about it a little bit, but and we've been sort of hinting at this whole conversation, but in addition to donating to your local abortion funds plan, PPMW also has our own abortion fund that does exactly what we've been talking about. It helps cover the cost of abortion services, and including transportation services for those seeking abortion services from states who either already have a ban in effect or states that are set to have a ban in effect. Again, for those of you looking for the links on Instagram, they'll be in our link tree. For Facebook, we'll drop them in the chat. There's also our DCAF, the DC Abortion Fund, and for those of you who are watching from, which will probably be the closest for both Nova and Prince George and Montgomery County, within our jurisdiction. But other ways you can get involved. Storytelling is huge. We also need to end the stigma that we see a lot of fear-mongering and misinformation around abortions and receiving abortions, and the biggest way to do that is to share your story. If it's safe and accessible for you to do, and encourage your networks to as well. And if you haven't had an abortion, your experience with Planned Parenthood. People have a lot to say about Planned Parenthood, and so again, ending the stigma and the fear, and especially the misinformation about what we do, what we provide, and the experience around having an abortion. So again, if it's safe and accessible for you all to do, please share that. You can reach out to us and share that with us directly. You can share it on social media, but we're using the tags "this is personal" and "bands off our body" to just there are people and faces behind these stories, and so it's important that we're sharing them.
Should we talk a little bit about Maryland?
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about DC. If you're just joining us and you're from DC, feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to continue talking about DC. Let's talk about Maryland. So in Maryland, the right to abortion has been codified for decades, which is great. We can't take it for granted. We have to keep up the fight. Nothing can be taken for granted. But we do have solid protections in Maryland, and just this past legislative session, we were really, really honored to participate in a great fight for abortion access, the Abortion Access Act. Some of you may have participated with us. We know that we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, even thousands, it ended up ranking up to, of emails into Maryland state legislators supporting the Abortion Care Access Act, and it passed, and Governor Hogan vetoed it, and we overrode the veto, and that's because of your advocacy. So what does the Abortion Access Act do? It does a few things, one of which is super important. There were some out-of-date laws on the books that prohibited certain kinds of practitioners, advanced practice practitioners, from performing abortions, and it limited it to physicians only. Totally out of date. Medical scope of practice has changed over time, and so we got rid of those, and so we can increase access by having folks who are qualified in who have other licenses be able to perform abortion services. Also expanded access through insurance, and really importantly, provides a fund to be able to train more and more folks for abortion services. We know that we hear all the time about how there isn't enough training to make sure that those who want to perform abortion services can get the training that they need, and this provides a fund for that training. So the Abortion Care Access Act is a huge step forward in continuing to increase access for abortion. Virginia, a little bit of a different story. So, Maryland, if you're looking to get involved, again, continue to stay connected with us, and we'll continue to talk about different ways to get involved. Virginia. So Virginia, we had a couple of great years with pro-reproductive healthcare majorities in the Virginia General Assembly, and we're able to repeal some terrible laws that were on the books before, 24-hour waiting periods, other kinds of targeted regulations against abortion providers, so that Virginia abortion is legal, and also some of these terrible laws that were in effect for so many years are gone. But we are in a perilous state. We're really vulnerable in Virginia right now because, as many of you know, within minutes of the decision from the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade, Governor Youngkin, who is anti-reproductive health care, announced that he would go after a 15-week ban in Virginia. Over 80% of people in Virginia are pro-reproductive health care access to abortion. We cannot have a ban in Virginia. We shouldn't have a ban anywhere, but that is against the will of the people in Virginia, and we will be working to make sure that that doesn't happen. But we've got we're hanging on by a thread in Virginia right now, and so we're going to have to, because of the makeup of the legislature right now, so we're going to have to work really hard to make sure that we beat back any kinds of restrictions coming up in general session. We did it this year. There was a 20-week ban that we were very happy to be a part of. Thank you to those who made calls and raised your voice and helped to beat back a 20-week ban, and we'll go at it again this year.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone who's tuning in right now. Again, we're talking about the overturning of Roe v. Wade and what that means and the impacts that it has in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. Stay tuned for the end, because we'll have Frankie give some things that you can do to support and stay involved with PPMW. And does anyone have any questions at this moment?
Yes. Nicole Clark Consulting on Instagram wants to know, speaking of abortion funds, how does PPMW work with them? In parentheses, funding, transportation, referrals, etc. Is it all DMV abortion funds or specific ones?
That's a great question. We've worked with abortion funds in a number of different ways over the years. So Planned Parenthood Metro Washington, we serve the DMV area, so we certainly concentrate as PPMW in the DMV. We have health centers in DC, a health center in Suitland, Maryland, and a health center in Gaithersburg, Maryland. We've worked closely with DCAF, the DC Abortion Fund, over the years, as well as other abortion funds, that anybody who is able to help the folks who are seeking our services. A little bit earlier, Frankie also mentioned that PPMW has its own abortion fund that we have started because the need is so great, and one of the ways to be able to support folks who need assistance with obtaining abortions is to donate directly with PPMW's abortion fund, DCAF, or others. But we really encourage people to think broadly. We tend to work because of our patient base and because of where we serve with folks that are local, but there is a need across the country, and we really encourage everybody to donate where it feels right to you, and to make sure that people who are thousands of miles away now from care have access to the funds that they need to seek it.
And there is the National Abortion Fund Finder, and so we can also make sure that we link that so that you can also, if you can, donate to abortion funds in states that are already seeing the effects of a ban in place. And so we can make sure that we have that information for you all too.
Any other questions?
Comments?
Not at the moment.
Okay, well, so now that we went through what the landscape is in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, Frankie can give you some more information on how to get involved and how to support us.
Absolutely. So as shared a little bit throughout, one of the biggest things, and as Betsy put it, our number one priority is keeping abortion funds afloat. There is already a demand and an increased demand for abortion services support, and so one of the ways to do that, again, if you're able to, is to donate to PPMW's abortion fund or your local abortion fund. Again, we'll drop the links either in the chat on Facebook, or they'll be in our link tree for Instagram to be able to find a local one, the one that's local to you, or if you're able to support ones in these states that have a ban, please do so. Another way is we really need to support DC statehood. And so for DC residents, this might look like checking your voter registration, make a plan to vote November the 8th for the midterm elections. And for DC statehood, you can check out our partners at Neighbors at United DC Statehood to support them in their work in fighting for DC statehood. Join us in the fight for DC statehood. Call your local electeds and just ask what their stance is, how they're supporting it. And for states, for Maryland and Virginia that are states, you can push even harder with your elected officials. And then I think you can also, and again, sharing your story is probably one of the biggest, most effective ways, again, to just end the stigma, help normalize and humanize the conversation around abortion, clear up misinformation, and really help mitigate against the fear mongering that we constantly see from our opponents. Other ways you can help, sign up to volunteer, either with your local Planned Parenthood affiliate, that's probably us, or other repo rights orgs that need your support. And as Betsy said it also, social media advocacy is huge. You're already connected to us, hopefully, here on Instagram and Facebook. Please continue to do so, interact with us. We'll be dropping lots of information and updates on events that we're hosting, events that we're participating in and supporting. And please share it with your networks. The wider our network is, the louder the message will be, and our community will get bigger. Any last thoughts?
Thank you for everyone who stayed tuned in with us, and we hope to stay connected with you and look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining this morning.